Just some preliminary thoughts on March Madness. I think Auburn is obviously a contender. War Eagle. Oregon is an interesting dark horse. They're another team I tend to root for. And then you have teams like Michigan State, Duke, provided they can stay healthy. And you also have interesting teams like Louisville. It'll be interesting to see what they do against Duke today, because I think that'll tell us a lot about that team. I already know that they're potentially like a Sweet 16 Elite 8 team. I haven't seen a lot of them. And then I guess some other teams to keep an eye on. You have so Duke, Auburn, Houston, Florida. I think all of the top 4 teams in the SEC are really going to be teams to keep an eye on. Let's see what happens if I do this. Just taking a look at some of the settings. So I think a lot of the teams that you're looking at in really all of the top 8, St. John's is another team to keep an eye on. They're a really strong defensive team, so they could go far in the tournament. Maryland, Michigan State. Michigan has kind of been sliding lately, but they're another team to just keep an eye on. And then as far as dark horse picks to pull an upset, I like VCU as a potential Cinderella. I also like, trying to think of other teams I've seen. Texas is coming on strong. They did lose to Tennessee, but Tennessee just beat Auburn today. So that's another team to keep an eye on. And then Oklahoma, they also have Jeremiah Fears, who's a really strong freshman. And then I'm trying to think other teams that you might not think of. If Yale makes it, they could be a problem again. They upset us last year. And then as far as maybe like 3 through 7 seeds to keep an eye on, again, I like Oregon. Oregon's a matchup specific team for me. It depends on who they play. If they get matched up with the wrong team, like they faced Michigan State yesterday and lost, I feel like teams of that caliber are going to be difficult for Oregon to beat because Oregon struggles offensively at times, but their defense is elite most often, more often than not. But I think if you're looking at other teams to potentially pick for upsets, I think I would avoid the Big East. Marquette, Creighton, UConn, those are going to be teams that I think could have early exits. St. John's is the team I trust the most in the Big East. And then if you're going conference by conference, ACC, Louisville, again, another team to keep an eye on. I also like Clemson. I think Clemson could be a trendy pick to make maybe a Sweet 16 or Elite 8. I think they went as far as the Elite 8 last year. So that is a team to keep an eye on. And then other teams going conference by conference. Now we go to the Big 12. One of the teams that I would say definitely keep an eye on is the BYU Cougars. That team has really impressed me in the few games that I've watched of them this year. BYU, Texas Tech is another team to keep an eye on. And then obviously Houston is going to probably be a 1 seed. Provided that they win the Big 12. Even if they don't win the Big 12, they might be a 1 seed. So I think Houston's definitely a team to keep an eye on. I mean, obviously, but Texas Tech, Iowa State as well, if they can stay healthy. But I know Taman Lipsey got injured in the conference tournament. And then so we hit the ACC, Big 12, Big East. SEC, there's a lot of teams to keep an eye on. I think an interesting team is Arkansas in that conference because they seem to be hitting the right buttons toward the end of the year. I also like Ole Miss as a potential team that could make a run out of the teams that you wouldn't necessarily expect, because I think the thing about the SEC is it's not top end heavy this year. There's a lot of good teams top to bottom, with the exception of really just LSU and South Carolina. So I think if you're looking at the SEC, there's a lot of potential teams that on a matchup by matchup basis could be good teams to keep an eye on. Missouri is one of those teams. They've been more up and down. I would trust Ole Miss probably more than Missouri. Both teams have some very experienced players. And then as far as other teams from the SEC, I mentioned the top four: Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and Auburn, not necessarily in that order. And then the 5 seed, I think Vanderbilt could be another interesting team. They have some big wins this season against top end teams in the SEC. So I think that's a team to keep an eye on. And then mid-majors, I mentioned VCU. I also think George Mason, if they make it from the Atlantic 10, could be interesting. Either UC Irvine or UC San Diego, both of those teams are potentially dangerous. St. Mary's and Gonzaga, based on who has momentum right now, I'd say Gonzaga is the team that should be more bothersome for top seeded teams. Gonzaga is probably going to slide in as a 7 or an 8. St. Mary's will probably be a 6 or a 7, so they'll probably both be around the same in terms of seeding. Those are two teams, though, that I would say it's more of a matchup thing for them. Like if Gonzaga or St. Mary's goes against the wrong team, I feel like it'll be difficult for them to win, but there's definitely some teams that they can play very well against, specifically St. Mary's and Gonzaga as of late. Both teams have really turned it up on defense, and they always say defense wins championships, so we'll see how that goes. But those are just some of my preliminary thoughts. I'll be back tomorrow for a full live stream during the selection show, and I'll have some notes to touch on off the top if there's no questions. Thanks so much for sticking with me. This was just kind of a preliminary run through to make sure the tech was working and everything, but I appreciate you if you stopped by, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll hopefully see you tomorrow. So I will be live tomorrow at 5:55 p.m. Eastern time. So that's 5 minutes before the selection show starts, and I'll be going until 7 or 7:15. I'll be writing down the bracket. I'll have a notebook right here. So I'll be taking notes. I'll be watching on my computer with the volume off, and I'll be giving live analysis as it goes. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to join. There's a community post on my YouTube channel, and you can also go to the live stream that's scheduled for tomorrow and hit the notify me button, and that'll let you know when I'm live. It'll probably be at 5:55, but it could be a couple minutes earlier, a couple minutes later. So definitely check that out if that interests you. And with that, I'll sign off for the day. I hope to see you tomorrow. Martin out.